In this video, I'm going to be asking the age-old question, is it better to buy a late model tape deck if you're just getting into collecting tapes and you want something to play it on, or should you be looking for that really vintage look of a 1980s tape deck? Well, we're going to answer that question by going ahead and diving into the repairs, if they're needed, on this particular machine coming up right now. Well, hello everybody, it's Aaron. Welcome back to the channel. Also, I have a face. Ta-da! So I'm recording a front-facing camera as well. I'll be sure to edit some of those things in. I thought it might be nice to see, for you to see my surprises and things like that when things either work or we repair them or whatever. And also, a lot of times I'm back here behind the scenes like in awe and I forget to talk. So I'm just like, but there's no way to show that on camera. So I thought I'd go ahead and hook up a second camera. We'll edit that in. If you're a fan of that, if you like that particular format, please let me know in the comments below and I'll keep adding that in. It's not too hard to record and it just means a little bit more work in editing. But anyway, we're going to be talking about mid or late model tape decks, which means tape decks from the 90s. I find a lot of these at eWaste. So technically this is an eWaste Wednesday video. Wednesday is the day that I go to eWaste and find cool stuff to bring back and show on the channel. But I know that tapes it seems like they have a resurgence after resurgence. I know people at yard sales and stuff like that have told me that they've been selling a lot of cassette tapes. People are kind of getting back into that. And so people are also going to be looking for something to play them on. And I know you can buy new, brand new cassette decks and things like that, but it's not the same as going back to getting the actual vintage hardware and playing it on vintage hardware with proper cassette mechanisms and things like that, because the new ones these days aren't all that great. So let's go ahead and take a look at this tape deck and see if there's anything wrong with it. All right, so I've gone into handheld mode so we can take a close look at the features on this Technics deck. And to do that, I've plugged it in. Let's go ahead and turn it on and see if it works, because we're going to need a little bit of assistance here, I think, to see if some of these features work. And yeah, I see the display on, so it looks like this is working. Now you can see obviously there are, play and stop, and you can see there's two different directions here. So that means this is auto reverse, as you can tell by the lettering right there on the cassette deck. But everything is soft touch. So open. Ooh. Yeah, the motor is not great. Let's check out the motor on this one. That's the way it should be. A little slow. If you put your tape in and then you push it a little bit, it should automatically close, which it does. This is actually a really nice deck. I wish this was... Ooh, that's not good. We might have to see if we can fix that. But yeah, so we've got, controls of the direction. We've got a stop button here. And then we have the typical, fast forward, rewind, and things like that. There's controls for recording and for balance there, which is really nice. Counter, reset, things like that, of course. And then we've got a couple of other things here. We've got a reverse mode, which the reverse mode, if we press it, I don't know if it'll do it without a tape in. Let's see. Oh yeah, it does. You can see the little indicator up at the top moving, hopefully. And that will do either, like when the tape comes to a stop, that basically says, is it going to continue on this one just to reverse the deck and then go back? Is it going to go to the other deck and play that side and then reverse that one and play the back side of that and come back to this one? There's different things you can do with the reverse mode. Basically, what's going to happen when you reverse it, or it gets to the end of the tape, or it gets to the end of a recording, because it applies to recordings as well. We also have this ATC, which I'm going to come back to. This is actually a pretty cool little feature. We've got, along with forward and reverse, we've also got TPS, and that's the track search feature. And that we got that on both decks, and that will actually, if you press it, I don't know if you have to press it and hold it or whatever, it'll do a track skip and it'll go to the next, it'll detect the silence and it'll start playing the next track on the tape automatically. There's also a little button down here called Auto Record Mute. And what that button does, I believe, is it'll automatically put in a 4-second silence. So if you're recording from one deck to the other, and you are in the middle of your, let's say you record a song, you're making that mixtape for your girlfriend or whatever, and then you want to put 4 seconds of silence or some silence in after that song you recorded, you can just hit that once, it'll put 4 seconds in, or you can hold it down and you can put in an arbitrary number of seconds, like, 5 seconds or 6 seconds, however many seconds you want in between of silence in between your tracks. There's buttons in here for synchro recording, so you can just hit that one button and it will copy the whole tape from one tape to another. So great for dubbing tapes. And then also there's a speed right next to that, which of course will do, in this case, double speed. I've seen triple speed and some other things on some other players. This one, if you click it, it'll do double speed for you. Now there is Dolby here. I mentioned that in the intro, and this one will do no Dolby, Dolby B, or Dolby C, which is nice. Now let me jump over the manual real quick and I'll tell you about this really cool ATC, or automatic tape calibration feature. So I was able to find the service manual, well, and the user guide really, but I've been using the service manual mostly to look up some details about the various functions. And I came across this ATC function, and really throughout this manual and throughout the user manual, whenever it talks about making a recording or dubbing tapes or anything like that, it always tells you to use the ATC function, even though there is a separate record function. And ATC stands for auto tape calibration. I may have mentioned that just a minute ago. I can't remember. But basically the manual says that the ATC function records a test signal in order to automatically set the bias, equalizer, and recording playback level to the optimum recording conditions in accordance with the characteristics of the tape being used. So this will do some automatic adjustments for you, which is really cool. One of those advanced features that wasn't available on the early to mid 80s equipment, as far as I know of. But yeah, this will test for bias, as you can see here. If we were to do this, it would show bias on the screen, and it would adjust the output level. So it's the same at 400 hertz and 10 kilohertz. So it really just adjusts the bias for you and sets that up. And then it does the equalization. I think that's pretty obvious what that is. And then level adjustment, again, pretty obvious. But if you have a tape that's kind of quiet, the level needs to be brought up. It'll do that automatically for you. So you don't have to worry about, tuning that in yourself based on the level of the playback device. It'll actually do it automatically, which is really, really cool. Now, I will say in general, even though this is a mid 90s piece of equipment, the service manual is actually very, very detailed and shows you exactly how to take things apart. And it does give you some pretty detailed examples of like how to change the belts and things like that. There's also a troubleshooting guide. Now, it's not going to really help us, I don't think, too much in what we're going to be doing today, but things like, hey, I hit the play button, it won't play, kind of walks you through a decision tree of troubleshooting this thing. And of course, there are block diagrams and detailed schematics, so you can go through and troubleshoot the actual circuit itself. There's a parts list, and there is an exploded view, a diagram that shows where everything fits together. If you were to take it all apart and kind of stretch it out, it shows you all of that too. So again, we're not at the point yet where they just weren't even making these service manuals. They're still making them in the mid 90s, and they're very, very detailed, at least for Technics equipment, at least for this deck. Not only are there great features in this manual, but you can get great features from the sponsor of this video, PCBWay. PCBWay offers low-cost, high-quality prototype PCBs and a whole lot more. And from now until November 10th, you can enter into their 3D printing design contest. That's right, there's 2 different categories you can submit. You can either create a version of their official mascot Ian, or you can create your very own original character, figurine, or doll. First prize gets up to $500, so submit your 3D printed design today, and I thank PCBWay for sponsoring the Retro Hack Shack After Hours. Well, I'm getting ready to do a first playback test on this machine. I wanted to point out something when I opened the drawers again and looked inside to get ready for head cleaning. This thing does have dual cap stands here, so that should be really good for, tape control. In other words, making sure that the tape is tight and travels smoothly across the heads. So that's really good. That's a nice feature to have. And then, of course, I'm just going to be cleaning this with some isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip to clean those heads off, and also the cap stands and the pinch rollers. Okay, let's start with deck 1. I'm going to test both sides here, and we're going to start with Anders Enger Jensen's In Space that I happen to have new on cassette. I'm not sure I've actually played this one before. The leader is still there, but Yeah, I'm not sure. Side A, side B. Well, let's put in side A. See how it goes. Oh, I forgot. It's soft touch. I keep pressing it. That's probably what happened to this motor. People were pressing it instead of, using either the button or the, press to close mechanism here. And that's probably done something to either the belt or whatever's driving this door closed. But let's just see if it works. Ooh, I'm getting a clicking sound. But it is playing. I think I'm hearing some of the clicking coming through in the audio. So the side 1 definitely needs some repair. Let's go ahead and try the deck 2 and see if that sounds any better. Okay, this time I'm not going to push it too hard. There we go. Let's see what we got. Okay. That sounds pretty good, but it sounds like there's some warbling, so I think there's a lot of wow and flutter on this side. This side didn't sound like it had as much wow and flutter, but it's got either some belt issues or something going on with the motor or perhaps the gears on this side of the tape deck. Okay, now I want to test the tape speed, and to do that I've got someone's recorded on calibrated equipment a couple of tones here. There's a 1 kilohertz tone, a 3 kilohertz tone at 0 dB, and then there is a 7 kilohertz tone at negative 10 dB on the other side. Right now I think it's set on the 3 kilohertz tone, so we can pop this thing in. Oops, keep forgetting not to push that too hard. That is definitely going to break something. And then if we play that, the first thing I want to do is test the level here to see where this gets to. It should come right up to 0 dB because that's the way it was recorded. Yep. It does. It comes right up to 0 dB, so that part is good. Now, I don't want to put you through that noise, and I do want to test tape speed, which is a good thing to use this tape for as well. Since we know this is a 3 kilohertz tone, we can go ahead and play it and then record it in something like Spectrum Analyzer on my Android phone here. And so I took this snapshot earlier of the 3 kilohertz tone, and you can see it's coming in just a tad bit slow at 2,977 hertz. So that's about like 0.07 or 0.7% off, something like that. It's a very minor percentage off. So you could go in if I wanted to. Maybe I'll do this later. And for wow and flutter, you can use something like Audacity. I think it's supposed to be like 0.1% or something really low for this tape deck out of the factory. All right, I'm going handheld again to show you the inside of this thing. And this is another benefit of, a late model deck like this that is fairly high quality. There are also late model players that are low quality. This one happens to be, I believe, pretty high quality, but they also have fewer components inside to deal with. So, if something goes wrong, as if it's one of these common parts, it's going to be a lot easier to fix. Now, of course, if it's a custom ASIC or something like that you can't get a hold of, then that's going to be a little bit more difficult to fix. So there's a trade-off there. But this back section here is the power supply and amplification area. And then, of course, we have our 2 decks up here, deck 1 and deck 2. And the nice thing about this is I can actually remove the ribbon cables. There's another little cable that comes down here on the board somewhere, and I can just remove those and take the deck out for service, making it really easy. Other units from like the 80s will have way more stuff inside. In fact, you can go look at my boombox repair video that I did a long ways back on the channel and just see how complicated that thing is on the inside, but compared to this. So this is really easy to fix if you need to get in here, adjust those speed of the motors, like I said, or change belts or things like that. You can do it with just a few disconnections of some cables and maybe removing a couple screws. Makes it a lot easier to work on. All right, well, I've been doing some research in the service manual, and I wanted to try just adjusting the speed of the motor over here on deck 2 to get it more closely aligned with my calibration tape here. You can see perhaps in the camera that there are these orange pots, one here, and there's one over here on this deck. The ones here and on the inside here are for the normal tape speed, and then this one has a second pot, which is actually for the high speed adjustment. So it has 2 adjustments on this side and only 1 on that side. So I want to start with deck 2 and just see if we can get that a little bit closer to 3 kilohertz. Here we go. All All right, well, that was really hard to adjust because the app here was kind of dancing all around and I couldn't get it to hold steady. So I just had to kind of guess. I could kind of see where the peak was in relation to this mark, which just happens to be at 3 kilohertz. So I just adjusted that pot until I could get that as close as I could. And then I hit the pause button to see where this indicator was, and it is exactly 3 kilohertz now. So that is 3 kilohertz on the money. All right, well, I've gone ahead and removed this deck 1 that was having the problem with the eject motor. And you can see I've really done a lot of disassembly, or at least it seems like I have. But because this deck is a more modern deck, it was actually really easy to do. I mentioned those cables earlier. Those just came right out. And there were a few screws on the front panel there that I had to remove. And then the whole front came off and I could access the screws I need to remove this. The instructions are actually pretty clear in the service manual. I've been going through it, and for what I need to do, at least for this part, it's pretty easy to walk through and see exactly what screws you need to take out and what you need to do, and they even give you reassembly instructions. So it's a lot simpler than it all looks. Now I want to show you what I found so far. There is a gear. You may not be able to see it because it's black on black here, but there is a big wheel gear here that drives a shaft, if you will, a plastic shaft up and down, and that actually drives the cassette opening. And what I wanted to see was perhaps the teeth in this shaft where it mates up to everything. Maybe those teeth were worn out or broken or something like that. I don't know. So anyway, when I got this thing out, I found that I could manipulate this gear right here and either open or close the door. If I take my finger off it, there we go. So now maybe you can see it's opening just by me moving that gear, and I can get it all the way open, no problem. And then I can close it with the same gear, just going the other way. And you'll notice when I do that, that there's no rattling or noise that's taking place. So I think from the gear through this up and down thing with the teeth on it to the door and everything, that all seems to be working well. So I need to go back to the service manual and see what's driving this particular gear, because I think the problem is upstream, if you will, or at least further up in the chain of what's driving this particular motor. All right, well, the gear that I need to inspect is actually down here, right in the middle here under this PCB. So it's getting, more and more complicated as we go, unfortunately. But my supposition, I think, still holds true, is that when you get this later equipment, there will be less things potentially wrong with it. Even though this one does have something wrong with it, I think the potential for something going wrong in this later gear is still low. But in this case, got to see what's going on under here. And we know that the belts are good. Just as a reminder, the belts are even harder to replace. You have to take this off, you have to take the next section off to get to the belts, and then you have to hold the belts on some prongs while you put everything back together and then use tweezers to get the belt back on. So the belt, if the belt was bad, that would be even a bigger problem than we have here. But what I see here, let me put my glasses on so I can see a little better. I've desoldered this motor up here, which I discovered, which drives, this motor drives that gear down here that opens the door up. So this is the main driver for the cassette, but this motor actually drives that. So the problem could be in the motor or in the gears here. The hardest part about getting this off, I've already desoldered these 2 points for this motor, but I also have to desolder this connector here, this 4-pin connector that connects this part of the PCB to the motor. That's really difficult, and all I've got to do that with, I could take this inside and use my bigger soldering iron, but out here in the garage, I've just got this pine sill, which is great. But what they say to do is to put your soldering iron over all 4 connections here like that and melt them and then pull everything off. And it's kind of difficult to do because there's other press fit connections here that are holding the board on. So you have to be really careful doing it. I think what I'm going to do though, what I'm going to try to do anyway, is use my desoldering braid and put a piece of that over these 4 connections. And that'll do 2 things. It'll wick away some of the solder, but hopefully also it will spread the heat enough that it will melt the solder on all 4 joints at the same time, thereby letting me pull this thing off. So I'm going to give that a try now. Okay, here we go. I'm going to try to keep my hands out of frame here, but that may not be possible. Oh, this is going to be tough to do. I can see the smoke coming up from the solder wicking in there, but I don't think I'm getting all of those pins at the same time. Oh, I did it. I think I did it. That actually worked. The press fit connection over here is holding this on, but I think it's basically loose. Yeah, it's this connection here. that came out. There we go. Hey, look at that. That actually worked a lot better than I thought. And there are a couple of electrolytics here that I'll inspect to see if those are leaking or bad. So that's good to know as well. But basically now I can get a closer look at what's going on. Okay, so I finally bit the bullet and went ahead and took off the second part as well, which was on here, which means, of course, my belt came off. But that's okay for now. And I'm glad I did that because now I can finally see what was causing the eject motor problems. But there are gears missing right over here on this side. The teeth have been pretty cleanly wiped off. So that is the source of our problem. So I may try to 3D print a new gear, but 3D printing, especially with an FDM printer, is not known to be that great for this kind of stuff. You really need a resin printer to have any hope of success even. But I think I'll break out some ABS plastic and just play around with this a little bit and see if I can get it to work. And if I can, then maybe we can save this mech. Otherwise, I'll have to look for a new one at e-waste that matches this. You know, there may be several TAC models that have this mechanism inside where I could go in and steal this part from, or steal the whole mechanism and replace it. Okay, it is the next day because I have spent all day yesterday, since working on the video, crafting a new gear to go on this motor. I showed you where those pins were gone. And what I found is that this spindle just had a kind of a normal gear on it, this white one here. And then on top of that was this kind of flexible extender thing that went on top, and then that's where the gears were missing. But it was kind of crumbling, and it is very flexible. I don't know if it originally was that flexible or if it became flexible over time. Anyway, it was cracking and breaking off, so yeah, this was no good for multiple reasons. And the reason I printed so many of these, the first one actually came out looking really good, but I wasn't quite getting the right tooth definition. So I know it's going to be hard to see. I really had to evaluate this under a microscope, but I wasn't quite getting the tooth definition that I wanted around the gears, and the shaft on the bottom side here wasn't quite fitting like I wanted over the shaft. It wasn't fitting tight enough over the spindle here of the motor to hold it in place. So eventually I got as close as I could, and then I went ahead and put a little bit of E6000 glue on this. So it's pretty tight, and now we're looking pretty good, I think. I'm really surprised I got this gear so well defined on an FDM printer. I'm really enjoying my new 3D printer. It's doing great. I might even be able to print those pesky Apple eject motor gears that always break, the ones you have to order special. And they don't cost that much to order, but I might be able to print them myself in a pinch because this one came out really well. So I think this is going to work. Now that is modeled to be identical to the one that came off, except this was in two pieces and this was an all-in-one piece here. But I think there's another problem. So the gear that I just printed, when these things go together like that, it's going to mesh with this other gear down here. And I was able to take this out, which is a good thing. When I gave it a test on top of this spindle here, where I think it goes, it's supposed to mesh with, sorry my focus is going in and out so much. It's supposed to mesh with this top gear here. And you can see that it does not. It does not mesh with that. And then this lower gear, the smaller one there, is supposed to mesh with this, and it also does not hit that because it's too high. So I think what's happened is that this, I don't know if you want to call it a capstan or whatever, the spindle for this particular gear here has gotten jammed in or something and needs to be a little bit lower so that it meshes with these two gears, and that should work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can just lower this a little bit by moving the little washers that hold it on and get it to mesh with these two, and then should be good to put this thing back together and see if it works. All right, we have success. So what I had to do was I had to disassemble this, take this off, and then right in the middle there I had to drill out that middle part to 4 millimeters. And I've also updated my 3D model so that if I ever have to come back to this, I can come back and make it work. So it's just on the end, just from here to here, it's hollowed out a bit wider than the shaft. And then what that means is this part, if you can see it, that top part, when it goes on there, see if I can do this on camera. There we go. It actually sinks down into that hole. And now when it comes down here to the middle of those gears and I move it around, so the motor is moving this gear, and then there's another gear under here that's moving this, and then when it swings this way, it should come in contact with one of these motors. If it swings this way, it'll drive this one, and when it swings the other way, it'll drive that one. So now I think I've got everything working. I'm going to do a dry fit just to make sure, but I think it's all going to work. Okay, well, I've got it all back together. It only has one screw holding in the front panel, so I've got to be careful. Everything's plugged in. I will say when I plugged in the power switch was already turned on, or maybe it just comes on when you plug in the power when it's been off for a while. And I heard kind of a whooshing sound. A whooshing sound? Here, I'll show you what I mean. I'll put my mic up next to it so you can hear it. So, yeah, I'm hearing, to me, what it sounds like is a belt that maybe is not too happy or is sliding. So I hope that's not the case. But let's just go ahead and hit eject and see what happens. Oh, not good. Eject is not working. Works on that side, no problem. Very quiet and nice. But on this side, nope, no go. Feels like it's not engaging. Well, I'm going back in for another attempt. Obviously something's wrong. I think maybe the gears aren't aligned up here. Maybe when I put this in, I didn't do it carefully enough and shoved one of those gears over to one side or the other where it shouldn't be. But I'm going back in here, and I also notice that there is a loose spring. So that came off from somewhere, and I'm going to have to figure out where that goes as well. Okay, I've got everything disassembled to the point that I need it to be, and I did figure out where that spring went. So I was able to look at the service manual, and you can see right on top of that gear is a spring that looks an awful lot like the one that came out, and sure enough, that's exactly where it goes. It had popped off of there, so I don't know if that was causing a problem. Can't imagine that one little spring would be causing all that, but maybe, I don't know. But it's back on there now. Now the other thing I want to do is I put this back on where I think it should be so that all the gears are meshing together. So what I want to do now is I've hooked up a power supply. I've got it set for 5 volts. This motor can handle, I think, between 5 and 12 volts, maybe between 6 and 12 volts. We'll see what happens. All I want to do is I want to set the lever here, the door lever, in the middle position. And then I want to turn the power supply on and just touch the terminals here and activate the motor to see if it's actually driving the door opening mechanism or not. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up the door a little bit, so to speak. Okay, so that should be about in the middle. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn on my power supply. I just want to touch the motor and see if this mechanism moves. No, it's just spinning. So something is not meshed together enough to make that door open. All right, so when I hooked the motor up, when I had this together, I could feel that, one of the reels, probably the take-up reel, or I don't know which side it's on, but I could feel that this one over here was moving. So that means that when I put it together, this thing automatically went over into this position instead of being straight down in the middle position. And I think the middle position is where it needs to be in order to drive the eject mechanism. One way's forward, one way's reverse. But when it's in the middle, it should drive this gear down here, which should then open up the eject mechanism. So what I noticed is that this little wheel here has a hole in it. There's a hole right there. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe that's a better angle. But there is a hole in this gear right up there. And what I'm thinking is that I had this in a different position when I was trying to put everything together. Perhaps that hole needs to be pointed up when I put this together in order to get this to work. So let me try that. Okay, here we go. Fingers crossed. I don't know if you can see this black gear, but I'm looking for that black gear to move. Yes, it's moving up. Yes. I think that's what the problem was. That one gear was not in the right position. Let's see if we can move it back down. Yep, there it goes. Perfect. Perfect. Okay, time to put this thing back together. See if it works again. Oh, man. Okay, I've gone through the whole process again, putting it all back together. I really hope that this was the problem. Well, there was definitely 2 problems. The spring And I think that gear, that cam gear in the back being lined up exactly right, I think those were the problems that we saw. So let's go ahead and plug this in and see what happens. Nothing happens. Hit power. Oh, there we go. Oh, it closed. Ooh, baby. Okay, let's go ahead and try to open it. I mean, it's not the quietest mechanism anymore. Not like this one. That one's much quieter. But that one still kind of buzzes, but it's not nearly as bad as it was when we first tried this out. Let's go ahead. Let me put it in a tape and we'll see what it sounds like. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. Yes, getting the test signal. Now I want to test this again to see if if we're still at 3 kilohertz for this thing. So let me go ahead and get out the spectrograph, whatever the app is on Android. Okay, and let's see what we've got. Okay, well this is the 7K tone. I might have put this in the wrong side, so maybe we just need to reverse direction here. Oh, it didn't like that. All right, so this is the 3 kilohertz tone. It's coming out at 3047, within the range of where we need to be, but I'm going to see if I can adjust that a little bit and see if I can get it closer to 3K. All right, my eyes may be deceiving me, but I think that says 3K. So at least tape speed is good on this thing. And let's just do a audio test. Yeah, that's working. Perfect. So before I was getting a little warble in there every time because the gears were broken. And so now I'm not getting that anymore. So it seems like my little 3D printed motor so far is holding up pretty well. Okay, well, let's just compare that to how it sounds in the second player, or deck 2 over here. Okay, here we go. Oh, what? You gotta be kidding me. Nothing. So all I get is a sound out of this thing. I wonder if that same gear is causing a problem again. Okay, well, time to 3D print another one, I guess. And I know it's going to be hard to see this, or at least it is for me on my tiny screen, but right there should be a belt on this black pulley right there where my finger was, and guess what? No belt. So either the belt slipped up or it did finally break and we need to replace it. This is on the second deck. All right, well, I'll tell you, once you've done this 4 or 5 times, it gets a little easier. So I'm in here and the belt was just laying in here basically, and the belt did not break and it still is fairly elastic. So I'm going to go ahead and clean all of this up with some alcohol wherever the belt travels here. And I'll also clean the belt up with some isopropyl alcohol a few times. You know, maybe it's just starting to shed some rubber, and that's causing a little powder, you know, get that rubber kind of powder stuff on the belt maybe. I don't know. I'm going to clean it up and see if it will stay on the system here. And I just put a little alcohol on here, and I'm folded a paper towel over here, and I'm just kind of pulling it through. And I've done that a couple times now. You can see I'm getting quite a bit of kind of it looks almost like a graphite material. So whether that's coming off the belt or whether that's coming off some parts, maybe the plastic, I don't know. But it's definitely probably just slipped off. It was probably pretty slippery. Okay, well, as usual, I plugged it in. I forgot it automatically turns on when I plug it in, and the door, the cassette door, which was open, did close automatically. So I think that is working. Yep, that's working fine. Now, the question is, will the belt stay on so that I can play a tape on this deck? It has a little catch there at the end. I wonder if that's why the belt is slipping off. Oh, well, let's see. There we go. Okay, and can we play in the other direction? Yes, we can. All right, well, not bad. I almost gave up on this thing because after that thing went bad, I just did not want to go through all the effort to get this working, because I was like, forget it. I kind of got disappointed. And I think we all do during these repairs. We get to that point where it's like, is this even worth it? I don't know. But I think in this case it was, because now I've got a completely working deck with a replaced gear over here. I have a 3D printed replacement gear for this side if it ever goes bad, but it's totally fine. It was just the belt slipped off, and now that's all clean. Maybe that'll stay on. And if it doesn't, then I can look for new belts in the future and I'll know how to get in here. It took this time to take this deck apart. It took me maybe 10 minutes, including the desoldering and everything. So I'm really getting good at taking this tape mechanism apart. The first time I did this one, it took me the better part of an afternoon. So I'm getting good at it. I could specialize just in this model of Technics tape decks. I only repair this specific model with this specific tape mechanism in it. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. Let me go ahead and put the cover back on now, button everything up, give it a nice shine, and we'll just see what it looks like when it's all done. Okay, now let's go ahead and try out the diagnostic mode. And to do that, I have printed out the instructions. I don't know if this is going to be better or worse for my eyes, but it's a full page of instructions from the service manual. And it's pretty cool that this thing has a self-diagnostic and it can diagnose quite a few things. So let's just go ahead and try this out and see what it says. We'll do this on deck 2. And to do this, it says we need to, first step, okay, now it says we need to put this in the diagnostic mode by being empty with no cassettes, which they are. Press and hold Dolby and the deck 2 stop button for about 2 seconds. So we've got, what's going on here? So let's hold this down for 3 seconds. Then hold this down for 2 seconds. Oh, there we go. Now the little indicator is flashing. And then it says insert a normal tape. And for that, I have this Memorex tape. This is very much I'm sure I use this exact brand of tape. I certainly have the exact markings, this Memorex with the triangle and the 80s colors. Very, very nostalgic. I'm sure I made my girlfriend some mixtapes on this exact type of cassette back in the day. Here we go, we're cracking the seal. Okay, so this is a brand new tape. So it's to insert a normal tape. Okay, that is done. Press deck 2 forward play button to play the tape for more than 1 second. There it goes. That's more than 1 second. And then it says insert a normal tape in deck 2, which it already is. Rewind the tape for 1 or 2 minutes before use. Well, okay, let's go ahead and let's rewind. Let's fast forward a little bit. Okay, it rewound by itself. I don't know if that's a good sign or not. And then it says press the record button. And that's supposed to record a tone. First it's supposed to record 8 seconds with no sound, and then 20 seconds with a 400 hertz test signal, and then it stops. And then I think we get our results on the screen here. You can see it's definitely doing something here. Okay, it stopped, it recorded, and then I think we hit stop to see the results. It says H01 or HD1, H01. It says irregular action of cassette mechanism. Example, the forward play button results in reverse play button. It says the cassette mechanism mode switch and plunger are defective. Check and replace them. Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's true because it's definitely working. Maybe there is something going on. I don't know. And it says to reset the diagnostic mode, go ahead and turn it off and on again. Turn it off, turn it on, it's on. Let's see if that test tone is still on this thing that it was supposed to record here. Okay, let's see if we can hear that tone. Yep, there's that record test tone. Still on there. Okay, well, I don't know if false positive. It's certainly coming up with some sort of error, but it's working and it sounds fine to me. All right, well, there it is. Everything's cleaned up and seems to be working fine. I'm glad I took the time to do it because it took quite a long time. And, you know, it does give you a sense of accomplishment when you fix something like this. So back to the original supposition, is it worth buying a late model, meaning late 90s, mid to late 90s cassette player if you're getting into collecting cassettes? I guess the answer is yes, but don't be expecting miracles. So, in a lot of cases, these decks, they need new belts and they might need capacitors. In this case, neither of those were true. Actually, it needed a new gear and then the belt fell off and needed to be cleaned. So I guess that's still belt maintenance at the end of the day. But if you think about these decks, it's much easier to get in here and do this stuff with a good service manual than it would be on some of the old 80s stuff that I have sitting up on my shelf. Like behind me here, somewhere up in here, there's an old realistic deck from the 80s that weighs about 30 pounds that I want to get around to fixing someday. But that's going to be much more difficult than this particular repair was. Even though it seemed like a lot of work, I was able to get it done. And I bet that most hobbyist level collectors or people that wanted to get into cassettes could do this, or they could find a friend who was into electronics that could do this for them. So I'm still going to say it's better to go with late model unless you're really into collecting a specific vintage thing. But if you just want to listen to cassettes, late model is the way to go, even though you need to be prepared for some repairs along the way. If you like audio gear type videos along with home computers and E-Waste Wednesday episodes, go ahead and hit the like button and let me know and let YouTube know that you like that kind of stuff, because typically, since cassette and audio stuff is off-brand for me, that means that, and without those likes, YouTube is not going to recommend this video to anybody. So please do that. I really appreciate all your support, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.
End of line.